by comparison with other people who theorize having made their billions in Silicon Valley, you seem on the pessimistic side. If I compare your piece with something like Eric Schmidt's Foreign Affairs piece saying Google is going to democratize the world, or if I think of Yuri Milner's vision of the entire world being networked into a super brain that will solve all our problems. I mean, you seem like the sort of party pooper in Silicon Valley. Do you show up to kind of make everybody feel slightly more pessimistic than they otherwise would? Is that temperamental? Is it ideological? Or do you think that you simply have a different take on how the historical process works?
Well, I think the question that's worth posing is how important and how valuable are computers, and how valuable is everything else, and how does one measure that? So I agree with Schmidt and Milner that the computer revolution is continuing and will have major repercussions in various fields in the decades ahead. On the other hand, there are many other areas where there's a lot less progress. So we, for example, have had very little innovation in agriculture, which is, again, a biotech area where we had the green revolution that increased world food production by 125% from 1950 to 1980, and has stalled out very badly in the last 30 years. And so if you look at, say, something like the Middle East, you can look at it through the prism, an optimistic technological prism, which is that it's a shift from authoritarianism to democracy that's being mediated through information technology, Twitter, and other companies, and that it's also a story of positive technological progress. Or you can look at it through the prism of that one of the triggers is that basically food prices went up 30 to 50% in the last year, and that the green revolution in the Middle East is really linked to the failure of the, what I would say was the true green revolution of the 50s and 60s, and that you have to say that in many ways these are hungry people who've become more desperate than scared, which sort of gives you a very different cut on what's going on. I think there's a lot of truth to both, and it's important to understand both of these stories. So the people who speak about technology are almost all from inside the computer industry. And I think it's worth asking how it fits with everything else. Certainly the part that's very odd is when you look at wages in the U.S., living standards, when you take surveys of do people think that the next generation of Americans will be better off than the current generation, and the surveys have steadily been moving in a northeasterly direction where more and more people think they'll be worse off. And so you have an extraordinarily disconnect between the broad public opinion and the claims of these experts. And it's an important question, who is right?
This gives us a very different read compared with, I don't know, economists like Paul Krugman or Jeffrey Sachs, who say, well, inequality is a result of deregulation. What we shouldn't have done was deregulate the financial sector. And what we need to do is increase, you mentioned this point earlier, increase the role of the federal government in research and development, education, and that kind of thing. It seems to me you're saying something entirely opposite from that, which is that it was actually the regulation in these other sectors that prevented the innovation and trapped people in these underperforming sectors. Do you, in other words, have a broader critique of what might be called the liberal conventional wisdom, believed by, I would guess, 99% of the people in this room? Because it's actually quite a profound critique you're making, that everything should be deregulated.
Well, I certainly think technology should be heavily deregulated, and that its regulation forced people to do other things. So, if you lived in the Soviet Union, everything was outlawed, and if you were a really smart, talented person who didn't want to, want to compromise your integrity, you became a chess player or maybe a number theorist, and it produced great chess players and great number theorists, and the U.S. has produced a tremendous amount of innovation in computers and finance, and I think these things were, on the whole, good. I like chess, I like computers, I like finance, but I think we have to ask the question whether it implicitly distorted a lot of other things that have just sort of dropped from view. I think the economists like Krugman are most wrong on the view that you can do aggressive printing of money and aggressive fiscal borrowing here. And so if you think of the technology slowdown as both a fact and a problem, It's a problem we need to figure out what to do about. But you have to start with it as a fact. And the big question about the current debates on fiscal and monetary policy is whether you're digging yourself into a deeper and deeper hole, which would be the sort of the Tea Party austerity view of this, the Merkel view in a way, or are you digging yourself out of a hole, which would be the standard Keynesian view. And I think the Keynesian theory works well in a world of rapid progress. So you can borrow lots of money, you can smooth things out, and we'll go back to this incredible trend line growth rate. Whereas if you're in a world where there's no progress, that's a lot more problematic. And I think a lot of the debates about the current crisis involve a debate about history. And people are very fixated on the 1930s as a data point. And the conservatives and the Republicans were wrong in the 30s. They basically believed that there was not that much progress happening, and that you had to stay on the gold standard. You couldn't print money. You couldn't have this deficit spending, and sort of root canal republicanism was very much discredited. But I think it was not so much because Keynes's theories were profoundly correct as it was that you had incredible technological progress. So even in the 30s, you had the creation of the movie industry, of the aerospace industry, the plastics industry. Home appliances were sort of popularized. You had the development of the secondary oil recovery. And so even though there was a major economic and financial crisis, there were incredibly powerful tailwinds of progress that helped a great deal. And even though I think a lot of the New Deal economic theories were not quite correct, in a world of incredible technological progress, you will have a tailwind that will power many delusional ideas.